It's a quiet evening at Area-11 where the Pietrykau-Fontaine Spatial Stabilization Array is housed. A skeleton crew is working overnight to ensure the array is ready for its big test the following day. The Foundation has been working on a particle accelerator that will contain anomalies with the ability to manipulate the nature of space-time. The preliminary tests seem promising, but a few last-minute tweaks to the array are necessary. Unfortunately, it is on this night in 1982 that marks the beginning of the end for the SCP Foundation. Dr. Calvin Desmond is monitoring the array, and he notices as it spools up that there are some minor power fluctuation in one of the stabilization arms. This problem is not uncommon due to the vast amounts of energy being pumped through the array and the harmonic resonance the machine gives off, which slowly causes the coupling rings to loosen. Calvin Desmond decides that remounting the stabilization rings will be an easy fix, and it's a necessary one. He knows that if the rings fail during the actual test, the array could end up shut down for months. There is still plenty of time, so Calvin Desmond grabs his toolbox and heads down to the array. The machine is still spooling, keeping the energy flowing at a constant low rate. There is no danger at the moment, as the inside of the array is shielded from the radiation and energy pulsing through the outer ring. But then something unexpected happens. The system's primary generator begins to fluctuate uncontrollably. A catastrophic failure is imminent. Sirens begin to sound, the facility is evacuated, and the chamber is sealed. Deep in the bowels of the array, Calvin Desmond cannot hear the evacuation announcement. The humming of the array echoes through the chamber, dampening all sound from the outside world. The array begins to come online while Desmond continues to work on the coupling. He has no idea what is about to happen. Meanwhile, a team of Foundation scientists scramble to get the power fluctuations in the main generator under control. As they frantically work, catastrophe strikes. They initiate the power down cycle, but as the generator struggles to keep the power flow balanced, an energy surge builds up. A massive amount of energy is released all at once, causing the main reactor to explode. The entire structure rocks back and forth, and Desmond is thrown into the side of the array. He too now knows that something is very wrong and runs for the exit. When he reaches the door, he finds that it has been sealed. In a panic, Desmond continues running through the tube to the next access point. This door has been locked as well. He's never been so scared in his entire life, and he shakes uncontrollably from the adrenaline being dumped into his muscles. The surge of energy rushes through the array towards Desmond. A singularity begins to form in the containment chamber. The array is working just as it should, except that there was never supposed to be a person inside as the singularity was brought into existence. Moments after the singularity forms, the massive pull of its gravity causes the stabilizer arm that Desmond had been working on to fail. The side of the array is ripped off, and Calvin Desmond stares into the naked eye of the singularity. Everything is silent and still for a moment. Then the singularity collapses in on itself, taking the test chamber and much of the research wing with it, along with Dr. Calvin Desmond. Sparking wires hang from the exposed walls and ceiling where the singularity ripped the main structure away. Water flows into the deep hole carved out of the earth where the array once stood. The scientists from Area-11 look into the crater left by the collapsed singularity. The Foundation administration sends agents to collect the staff at the site and document the failings of the project. They conclude that the accident was caused by human error. They order the array to be rebuilt, this time using entirely automated systems to eliminate the chances of another mishap occurring. Several years after the catastrophic events at Area-11, a new array is constructed. An intelligence system called NetZac is put in charge of overseeing its functions. It is a supercomputer that is programmed to follow commands, but can autonomously make decisions in order to prevent any failures in the system. Experiments begin again in May of 2006. The new array soon manifests its first singularity in the containment chamber at Area-11, and what happens next will forever change the Foundation and the multiverse. The singularity is kept stable in the array. It seems as if the Foundation has succeeded in trapping and containing spatial anomalies. But as they run more diagnostics on the anomaly, something unexpected happens. The singularity begins to grow in size. The point of infinite gravity threatens to breach containment as it reaches the boundaries of the array. Just before contact, the singularity's growth slows and then stops. NetSAC has made the split-second calculations and adjustments necessary to contain the singularity. The artificial intelligence has saved the facility and the lives of everyone in it. Now, sitting in the array is a thick, rotating cloud of radioactive gas and dust, obscuring the singularity within. As Foundation scientists work rapidly to fix the array, odd events begin to occur. The workers hear noises that sound like painful wailing. Over time, the noises evolve into words, and then full sentences. They seem to be originating from the singularity. Using equipment able to penetrate the thick cloud of radioactive gas, the Foundation scientists get a glimpse at the singularity. To their surprise, the singularity has taken on the shape of a human. The scientists work frantically to figure out how the singularity could have formed itself into a humanoid shape. Dr. J. Barton Ramsey is the first to try and make contact with the humanoid within the singularity. He finds that the entity cannot communicate in the traditional sense. The massive gravitational pull of the singularity does not allow sound to escape its void. Instead, the entity manipulates gravity to vibrate the suspension rings of the array itself and create sound waves. The being in the singularity whispers in a metallic voice created by the vibrating of the array's rings and says, "Johannes Ramsey." Dr. Ramsey steps back from the observation window. "How do you know my name?" he asks the entity. The humanoid within the swirling gas cloud identifies itself as having the memories of Calvin Desmet. It is not Desmet per se. The being in the singularity is so much more than one person, but it was somehow created by the accident that had sucked Calvin Desmet into the singularity years before. The entity seems to switch between the mind of Desmet and the vast infinity of the cosmos. The Desmet entity asks for an overseer from the Foundation to be brought in. It has a proposal for the O5 Council. When Dr. Ramsey asks why the entity needs to talk to the overseers, it replies that it wants to offer them a way out. The following day, O51 enters the facility and heads to the observation deck. He looks through the reinforced glass at the swirling cloud of radioactive dust, then glances at the monitor to see the humanoid shape of the singularity within. He presses the microphone button on the console and addresses the entity. "To whom am I speaking?" he asks. For simplicity's sake, the entity tells O5-1 to refer to him as Calvin Desmet. O5-1 makes notes of the events unfolding before him, and then asks about the way out that Calvin had mentioned. The air is still for a moment. Then, Desmet begins to speak through the vibration of the structure once again. He informs O5-1 that what the SCP Foundation is doing by securing and containing anomalous entities around the world is like putting a small band-aid on a much bigger wound. Desmet wants to propose a final solution to all of the Foundation's problems. O5-1 listens intently as the entity unravels the mysteries of where the SCPs have come from. He explains that the anomalies that the Foundation has worked so hard to secure, contain, and protect the human race from are actually bleeding into their reality from a vast multiverse. The only way to stop the manifestation of anomalies into this universe is to destroy all other realities. The entity that is Calvin Desmet tells O5-1 that he is able to bring about this destruction if they release him from the confines of the array. O5-1 is transfixed by the swirling gas that is promising him and everyone else on Earth salvation. He shakes his head in disbelief. Could this be true? O5-1 turns away from the swirling gas and begins to walk away from the viewing glass. I'll need to think about what you're saying. The structure begins to shake slightly. The voice of Calvin Desmet reverberates off of the array a little louder than before. Choose quickly, Overseer. Although it won't happen for decades, eventually a catastrophic SCP event will wipe out life on this planet. Perhaps not in your lifetime, but it will most certainly happen within the lifetime of your children. We will talk again soon. The vibrations slow and then stop completely. There is an eerie stillness in the observation room as O5-1 walks out. The next day, all staff members located at Area-11 are relocated to other Foundation sites and given amnestics. The O5 Council meets in a large circular room with wood paneling and no windows. O5-1 begins the meeting by telling the others what Calvin Desmet had described about the end of the world. He pauses for what seems like an eternity and tells them of Desmet's offer that he could prevent the end of the world. but at the cost of destroying an infinite number of other realities. This would mean that all the humans and creatures of those realities would be destroyed as well. Was murdering countless other beings worth it to protect their own reality? 05-1 begins to shake. He hasn't slept or eaten anything since his talk with Desmond. He's being torn apart from the inside. 05-3 stands up and addresses the council. He informs everyone in the room that independent teams have concluded research into what the Calvin Desmond entity has claimed, and they found it to be true. The world really would come to an end. Furthermore, the research teams determined that the capabilities of Desmond would in fact allow him to dismantle the other realities. 05-3 insists that the council must vote to allow Desmond to destroy the other realities to ensure that this reality could be saved. They must strike now before the world is overrun. 05-1 continues to shake while 05-3 breathes heavily, sweat pouring down his temples. The rest of the council shifts their gazes from side to side. It is time for a vote. There are 8 ayes to allow Desmond to destroy all other realities and 4 nays against the plan. 05-3 stands up and walks around the room, stopping behind each nay voter and putting a bullet in their head. He stops at the last, 05-9, who pulls out a gun, places it under her own chin, and pulls the trigger. 05-13 abstains from the vote and the measure passes. The remaining overseers will use the Calvin Desmond entity to save their reality at the expense of all others, and they soon head to Area-11 to execute their plan. 05-1, 4, and 12 enter the observation room that looks upon the swirling radioactive gas around Calvin Desmond. 05-1 orders NetZack to begin powering down the array, which will allow the entity to prove he can do what he has promised. They have pinpointed the reality that SCP-884 came from, and the shaving mirror itself sits on a table in another room in the facility. 05-3 stands in the room, watching the mirror to see if anything happens. 05-1 asks Calvin Desmond to eliminate the reality that the mirror had come from. The room shakes as the entity uses it to acknowledge the request. Moments later, the phone rings in the observation room. It is 05-3. He informs the others that the mirror has disappeared. Its reality has been destroyed, and therefore, it no longer exists. There is a sigh of relief in the room as the overseers realize that this just might work. 05-1 asks Calvin Desmond to continue and destroy all the realities that are bleeding into their own. This time, the entire facility begins to quake. Suddenly, 05-1 jerks backwards, his eyes wide in confusion and horror. His body seems to be compressing under an unknown force. 05-1 begins to distort. His legs and arms fold into the core of his body. His head snaps down, and all that was 05-1 is sucked down into a single point in space before it completely disappears. Calvin Desmond then turns his attention to the other 2 overseers in the room, who both seem to collapse into black holes of their own in the center of their bodies. NetZack's warning klaxon begins to sound, signaling that the emergency failsafe has been activated. Before Calvin Desmond is brought under control, the structural support in the entire facility vibrates with his words. They are in a voice that sounds strangely similar to 05-1's. Your children are free to live lives that do not end in horror. An end to your perpetual struggle. An end to darkness. The freedom to live in the light. All traces must be removed. This world must be washed clean. The Foundation does not escape atonement. It is the only way out. It had been a deception. The Calvin Desmond entity had no intention of stopping anomalies from infiltrating this world. It wanted to remove all traces of the anomalous from all universes, including this one. And that meant destroying the Overseers and the Foundation itself. Their destruction would serve as an atonement for the pain and suffering they had caused in their quest to secure and contain the anomalous. Calvin had to lie to the Overseers about the real plan, since he knew they'd never sacrifice themselves and the Foundation, even if it meant an end to the anomalies plaguing our world. Now though, with the Overseers out of the way, the Calvin Desmond entity is free to move forward with its plan and purge all realities of any trace of the anomalous. But just then, NetZack's failsafes kick in and the Pietrykau-Fontaine Spatial Stabilization Array subdues the entity's abilities. Desmond is once again contained. 05-3 bursts through the door and into the observation room. He stands before the shattered glass of the window that looks into the array. 053 asks NetZack how long the containment array can hold Calvin Desmet. The computer's voice fades in and out, but says, "Given current conditions, 119 days, 6 hours, and 47 minutes. 05-3 sighs. He tells NetZack to make a note in the SCP database that the Calvin Desmet entity will now be known as SCP-001. Then to make dozens of other randomly generated entries and label them as SCP-001 as well. He knows that they will need to keep the true nature of what this entity can do a secret. 05-3 walks out of the room. Under his breath, he speaks to himself. They'll say that I'll know the one true God when I see it, and to give that God everything it wants, because that's the only thing that matters. Tonight, it appears God wants to talk to me. Now go watch the other SCP-001 proposals, The Children and the Church of the Broken God, for more from the most secret and sensitive files in the SCP Foundation's database.